Have you ever wondered which sport will be responsible for the most viewed live event in 2030? From 1980 through 2023, the 5 largest US professional sports leagues will have earned more than $210 billion from domestic media rights alone, with the NFL making up a staggering 65%, or $136 billion of that revenue. In 2023, broadcasters and streaming services will pay $15.4 billion a year for all of their sports broadcasting rights. That's billions of dollars for billions of viewers. Under some of the most recent deals, TV networks will pay 2x their current fees to broadcast NFL games, and Apple signed a deal to pay around 3x the value of Major League Soccer's previous contract. That massive premium is because nearly every one of the most viewed live events of all time was a sports event. So with all these insane sports rights deals over the last year, which sports will net the biggest return on investment to become the uncontested champion and win the streaming wars once and for all? We're going to show you our analysis. All the top growing sports leagues head to head. We'll show you our data, then you tell us what you think. What sport will be responsible for the top streamed event in 2030? Will it be football or the NFL? Basketball or cricket? And how does the transition to sports streaming impact sports viewership in general? We're gonna go over it all right now. So let's start our fantasy matchup bracket with 2 up-and-comers, cricket versus basketball. Behind football, cricket is actually the second most popular sport in the world, with approximately 2.5 billion fans, predominantly based in a handful of countries across Asia Pacific. In fact, the Indian sports market is 90% dominated by cricket. Approximately 2.2 billion people watched the 2015 Cricket World Cup, and the Indian Premier League Cricket Federation just sold its media rights for $6.2 billion for the 2023 to 2027 cycle, in a two-way split between Disney Star, Disney's TV network in India, and Viacom 18. This is a pretty huge price tag indicative of growth potential. But interestingly, Disney decided to pass on the streaming rights for the IPL until 2027 and kept the TV rights instead. Why is that? Because 42% of Indians still prefer to watch the sport on their TV. Disney Star TV service already has the scale it needs to dominate, so it didn't need to break its teeth outbidding Amazon or Viacom 18, it just needed TV. Cricket currently draws 93% of all sports viewership in India. But does that mean that cricket could be the most watched live streaming event in 2030 as Indian fans drop their television remotes and pick them back up to turn on their streaming apps? We'll see. Well, let's compare cricket to basketball, which right behind cricket has 2.2 billion fans around the world. Basketball has been able to grow its following in Europe thanks to its inclusion of more European players, and China, which is a massive market for the NBA and has been ever since Yao Ming joined in 2002. Representation matters as it can expose a whole new audience to your sport. Interestingly, a couple of predominant Spanish language countries have grown their level of interest in NBA, so Latin America could also be a big growth area for the NBA as well. So which sport has more potential? Can cricket expand its reach outside of Asia Pacific, while basketball grows its reach in Latin America, or even further into Asia? Unfortunately, we don't have updated bidding wars for basketball to give us a clue to what the streamers are thinking in 2022. But the league most recently renewed its media rights in a deal worth $24 billion back in 2016. But the NBA plans to 3x that for its next contract when it comes up for renewal in 2025. Bidders, including Amazon and Disney, are already lining up, even though it's 3 years away. If we do want to follow the money, the 30 teams in the NBA make a combined revenue of $6 billion per year, and basketball has the highest median salary of any other sports league at $3.8 million. Combined, the NBA's 10 highest paid players are set to collect $751 million before taxes and agent fees, which is up 122% from 10 years ago. Compare that to the $860,000 median salary for the NFL and a $100,000 median salary for cricket players in India, and financially speaking, there's some strong money behind the NBA. But it really comes down to demographics and which league can grow its appeal in other countries faster over the next 7 years. Who do you think wins this matchup, cricket or the NBA? Let us know in the comments. Next up, our main head-to-head challenge, the NFL versus FIFA. The NFL is the most profitable professional sports league in the US. The NFL revenues reached nearly $18 billion in 2021. Of the top 100 most watched live broadcasts in the US between 2018 and 2021, the NFL counted for over 300. And globally, it's estimated the NFL has over 400 million fans. Now, that's a lot less fans than some of these other sports, so let's look at the numbers and see if this makes sense. Forbes estimates that the top paid player in the NFL this season is Aaron Rodgers, who makes approximately $68 million. If that surprises you, that's because Tom Brady retired. Psych! Meanwhile, the top paid soccer player Lionel Messi makes just about double that at $130 million. That also puts Messi just ahead of the NBA's LeBron James, the highest paid NBA player ever, who stands to net pre-tax earnings of $124 million from his 2022 to 23 on-court salary and off-the-court endorsements. While the average salary in the NFL is more like $2.7 million, players in the Premier League make an average salary of $3.9 million, which makes it the highest paying sports league in Europe. This graphic here shows how much more the NFL makes per year in the US than every other major sports league. Second happens to be the NBA with $2.6 million per year. The NFL renewed its media rights contract last year to the tune of $105 billion in a TV deal from 2023 to 2033. That's $10.5 billion per year. Meanwhile, the Premier League, the most watched football league in the world, recently renewed its own global media rights deal, where its international streaming rights sold for $7.1 billion and domestic rights for $6.9 billion. This brings the league to a total of $14 billion over the next 3 years. But that's $4.6 billion per year compared to $10.5 billion. So a sport with 12 times fewer fans making 2x as much could be indicative of growth potential. But is money alone a good enough indicator? What really matters for 2030 here is growth potential. For instance, will Amazon Prime's new deal to have football on Thursday nights stream on Amazon Prime Video help grow football's reach outside of the US? Here's a chart from 2015 of the countries with the most NFL fans outside the US. Considering the fan base of American football is heavily concentrated in North America, Australia, and some countries in Latin America and Europe, the sport holds huge growth potential in Asia. But the NFL still trails the NBA in popularity in major Asian markets like China. The only other single market with a smaller and soon to be larger market share than China is India. India actually launched its own American Football League back in 2011, but it only broadcast one season to households in India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka before it was put on an indefinite hiatus. The big issue with the NFL in India is unfamiliarity with the sport. But two trends could change this: the rise of fantasy gaming in India and the battle to control India in the streaming wars. At last tally, Amazon sits at about 13.6 million subscribers in India and is flatly 6th place as far as India's streaming market is concerned. Disney's Hotstar service, by contrast, is currently number 1 with about 50 million subscribers. But, as you can see in this chart, interest in Amazon Prime across India has continued to grow over time. And as Amazon grows its marketing in the country, there's a chance that easy access to Thursday Night Football over the next 10 years could lure more new fans in. Simultaneously, the rise of fantasy sports betting throughout both the US and India could contribute to greater interest in the NFL. There were 90 million fantasy gamers in India in 2019, and it is estimated by the end of 2022 there will be nearly 150 million fantasy gamers across the country. Disney has its sights set on sport betting as a growth avenue for its streaming content on ESPN, and has said that the under 35 demo wants sports betting as part of their sports lifestyle. In 2021, a lot of the NFL's viewership gains came from the average fan watching 20.3 games instead of 18.8, which some have attributed to the gamification aspect of fantasy football, which increases engagement as every game watched counts as opposed to just those played by your favorite team. But is all this enough to compete with the world champ? While the NFL might be the biggest sport in the US, it is not the biggest sport in the world by a lot. Far from it. That title goes to actual football, or soccer, with an estimated 3.5 to 4 billion fans around the world. To put that in perspective, 3.2 billion people watched the 2018 World Cup alone. The only other major sporting event, or live event period, to attract more viewers was the 2016 Summer Olympics, which saw 3.5 billion viewers tune in. And get this, it's estimated that the upcoming 2022 World Cup in Qatar will likely be watched by 5 billion people. Money-wise, between 2015 and 2018, FIFA generated nearly $6.5 billion, which is actually 3x less than the NFL revenues from last year, but it generated $5 billion at the 2018 World Cup alone. If you've seen our World Cup economics video, then you'll know that the last Super Bowl generated 4 times less than that. Soccer is also played all over the world, while American football is still unknown or unfamiliar to many. Now, that monumental popularity of football is not going away anytime soon, but it can be a detriment to its growth. Football is the most popular sport in nearly every continent except North America, which might explain why Apple spent 3x more on the media rights to Major League Soccer in the US. But there is one streaming service that could determine not only the direction of global soccer fandom, but the streaming wars itself. FIFA just launched its own completely free subscription service earlier this year, called FIFA Plus, and plans to grow it to 200 million subscribers by offering 40,000 live soccer games per year. For instance, if Amazon or even Apple were to eventually purchase FIFA Plus, they could then make larger bets to acquire the media rights to Premier League games. And then comes the 2030 World Cup and it is game over. Now, if the 2022 World Cup will be watched by 5 billion people, do you really think the 2030 Super Bowl has a chance against the 2030 World Cup to be the most watched live streamed event? Well, what do you think? Really, what do you think? Who is it gonna be? Cricket? The NBA? The NFL? Or FIFA? Let us know your draft picks in the comments. Thank you so much for watching.